Hello there, people of the internet. In the gun community, I am guilty of it myself. I am 100% or 110% in the same playing field. But in the gun community, we are always looking for the next best thing. But the next best thing, we want to find it in something that we like and something that justifies the choices that we have made or the biases that we have. Like, for example, if you're, I don't know, an old school bolt action rifle guy, like I'm sure you guys can see that I am, you'll come up with reasons why an old school bolt action rifle, like, say, an old military surplus gun, you'll come up with reasons as to why something like this right here is better in your eyes than a modern firearm for whatever purposes it is that most people are going to be using any sort of rifle like this for. And you'll try and justify why it is that your biases and your decisions have led you to something like this, and you'll try and find ways to make this as good as possible without really moving on to something new. Like, maybe you'll run some, well, this right here is a 7.7 Jap. It's like a 3.12 diameter bullet. Maybe you'll run some, I don't know, Hornady SXT through it, or something like a soft point versus just the standard full metal jacket that these military rifles used to run. Or maybe you'll do something special with it, like slug the barrel and figure out exact bullet sizes or exact bullet weights that this particular rifle likes, and you'll end up getting it quite accurate. Or you'll try and just do things to make your bias as happy and comfortable as possible. And for most of us, if we're looking at a firearm for any real practical purpose, odds are we're going to be looking at something like an AR or an AK or something like that. Here in the United States, it's probably going to be an AR. This right here is like just become the general purpose go-to rifle for most people. And I'm betting that a lot of you guys are like me, and you have watched a tremendous number of videos about people comparing 55 grain and 62 grain ball ammunition, like just military surplus ball ammo, trying to figure out which is better. And the reality is that they are both pretty much on par with one another if we're talking about the barrel lengths that we're most likely to see. Normally, if someone's rocking an AR barrel, they're rocking a 16 to a 20-inch barrel, and your 62 grain green tips and your 55 grain full metal jackets, both of these are going to do exceptionally well out of both of those barrel lengths at the distances that most people would be engaging at. So within like 300 yards, you're not even going to notice a difference between the two cartridges if you're rocking a 16 or 20-inch barrel. But still, that's not really going to stop us from sitting down and watching 50 different videos over the course of the next year trying to figure out what is and is not the best. And we're weighing the pros and cons. Like, oh, the green tips have a steel penetrator in them, but I'm using a 16-inch barrel or a 14.5 or a 12-inch or a 10-inch or whatever it is that you decide to use. And you're like, I don't want to have to worry about ice picking. So maybe we should look at the 55 grain full metal jackets. They got a lead core. They break apart pretty much immediately upon firing on some sort of gelatinous target. They're a really, really good option. And guess what? I have this 20-inch barrel, or I have a 16-inch barrel, and both of those would just do fantastic out of those particular barrel lengths. Or maybe you're like, I have a 1 in 12 twist rifle, and although it is probably going to be best to use 55 grain bullets, I wonder if I could get away with, say, 58 grain or 60 grain, or I wonder if instead of using these full metal jacket rounds, maybe I could go with like a VMAX round or something like that, or maybe I should use some soft points, or I wonder how fast a 40 grain bullet would be moving in a 20-inch barrel. Maybe I could load up some soft points, 40 grain, to run through the 20-inch, or maybe I should see how well they run in the 16-inch, or maybe I should just go out and get myself an AK. But the bottom line is, although like we have things that would just 110% solve like 95% of all of the problems that any of us would come across, not unless you're doing something absolutely spectacular, we're constantly chasing the next best thing, but the next best thing is only marginally better. Like the margins of that next best thing, like the amount of people who debate on 55 grain Full Metal Jacket lead core or 62 grain green tip, the number of people who are like, all right, I'm weighing the pros and cons between this cartridge and that cartridge. For all practical applications that you're probably going to be using these cartridges for, they're both going to work pretty much the same. From your 16-inch barrel, your green tip are actually going at the same velocity as your 20-inch barrel. They just kind of max out at about 3,000 feet per second due to the pressure curve and the types of powder that are used in these surplus cartridges. Your 55 grain bullets, you do get a little bit more velocity out of your 20-inch barrel, but it's not anything significant enough to really matter in a practical sense for what most of us would be using this particular application for. But it's still close enough for us to weigh pros and cons, and we're like, should I go with this or should I go with this? It doesn't really matter, but I want the next best thing, or I want to use 100%, like I want to be 100% certain that I'm using the greatest thing that I can get for the cheapest amount of money. And the pros and the cons and the practical situations that these would be used for, it literally just doesn't even matter. And as individuals, we're not the only ones subjected to this. Everyone is always chasing that next best thing. Let's say you don't even care about keeping the same platform. Let's say you're thinking to yourself, hey, I can't shoot beyond 100 yards. The 5.56 is great, but I like the AK. I'm going to go with it. The 7.62x39 cartridge just has more of a wallop than your 5.56 rounds at the distances that I shoot with the ammo type that I'm choosing to use, because I'm choosing to get the cheapest possible ammunition, which is going to be your Full Metal Jacket rounds, in which case 7.62x39 is absolutely going to be a better choice than something like 5.56 if you're shooting within 100 yards. So if you decide to go out and swap yourself to, a better rifle, fantastic. That's all fine and dandy. But I'm willing to bet at whatever it is you're using that rifle for, whatever you shoot with that 7.62x39 could have probably been handled with your 5.56 AR that you already had. And as individuals, with us going out and buying our own stuff and whatnot, we have a lot of options. But it's not just us as individuals. It seems to be like the collective whole of humanity in general is constantly chasing the high of the next best thing without the realization that what they already have is probably going to do like 95% of the jobs that they needed to do. Like, for example, the U.S. military. Right now, we're in the process of mass adopting a new rifle. It's going to be, I think right now it's known as the XM7. They might change the name on that, but it's a 6.8 millimeter round, and it's supposed to have like this ridiculous pressure inside of it that sends 6.8. It's going to be a 264 diameter. It might be a 277 diameter actually. But it's going to send this fairly skinny high BC bullet at absolutely screaming velocities from a very short barrel. And the goal of this rifle is to be able to shoot at targets at more effective distances. Like, the idea is to be able to land a round on a target at, they're talking about like 900 plus yards, which is great in concept, I'll give you that. But I'm not so sure that it's going to be the next best thing, because in most of your practical instances, unless they're going up against some sort of military force that has the ability to make those same 900-yard shots, just due to cover or urban environment or jungle environments or anything like that, the odds of your opponents getting up closer to you than that 900 yards and within the realms of what, say, an AK with iron sights would be able to handle, the odds of them getting within those distances of being able to put accurate fire down on you are quite high. There's a reason why, even though for just decades we had the ability to shoot at extraordinarily long distances, there's a reason why most of your modern combat takes place within 300 yards, because that's just the limitations of us as humans. Now, I get it, they got better technology to where they'll be able to spot things better, but that better technology doesn't make up, like I said, for the extreme jungles that we might find ourselves in, or the extreme urban environments we might find ourselves in. We might be doing CQB or something like that, in which case this next best thing probably isn't going to be the next best thing, because it's being designed for something that doesn't really practically happen, and they're doing essentially what they've been doing for the past who knows how long, and they're designing a rifle to fight the previous war that we fought. And I get it that in like a desert environment you might be shooting at very long distances, but we're doing more than just fighting in a desert environment. If you got guys going to the desert, equip them accordingly. But if you got guys doing other things, then maybe this new cutting edge rifle might not be the best option for them. One of the reasons why they're going to these new rifles is because the United States adopted something like the M4, and the M4's adoption was such a pathetic, a really, really bad, I don't want to call the M4 bad, but the way that it was adopted, into the U.S. military service was a really, really bad, poor decision done by the United States government. And what they did was they adopted a cartridge. It was the green tip cartridge, the M855, and they adopted it around a 20-inch barrel. They're like, great, we got our new cartridge. It can punch through a Russian helmet at 500 yards. Fantastic. And then they go and give their soldiers barrels that have 14.5 inches, and it just absolutely neuters the capabilities of that green tip round, and soldiers are just dealing with ice picking with their targets, especially if you're dealing with like skinny targets, which is one of the things that a lot of our boys had to deal with overseas. Those rounds are designed to go at a particular velocity in order to properly break apart and yaw and dump all of its energy onto its target. But especially with like skinny dudes, whenever you cut down that barrel length to where you don't get that velocity that's necessary, it's just going to poke a hole right through it. So rather than chase that high of adopting a whole new rifle in an attempt to resolve one individual problem, why not just go back to like a 20-inch barrel? Like if the United States military started issuing just M16s instead of the M4, or saving the M4 for like artillery crew or people like what they used to give the M1 carbine to, you know, make the M4 not the standard issue rifle, make it like a troop support weapon, and then start giving everybody the 20-inch M16s again. And I feel like you would see significantly better performance, especially if we increase the capabilities of the optics that are used on the M4 and M16 platforms. Take the optic that you're developing for the new rifle, implement it on the old rifle. You still have the M855A1 rounds, which are some pretty gosh darn screaming, terrifying rounds. They have some issues. They tear up feed lips. They got some pressure curve problems and things like that. If you can figure out those little issues, then you should resolve a good number of your problems. But that full-length barrel would be a much better option in an already known, true system that handles like most of the things that we need handled exceptionally well, and it can handle the things that are trying to be resolved exceptionally well with something like a new optic and maybe a few other minor tweaks and whatnot. But for the most part, the things that are trying to be solved really aren't that much of an issue in a more practical sense. But the bottom line is, just us as humans are constantly chasing that next best thing whenever it comes to our firearms. I mean, actually, this is a really good example. I got my Mosin Nagant. It's right here inside this big old pile. And I loaded up 150 grain, 174 grain, 180, and 200 grain bullets to be able to take that thing out, accuracy test it, see what works best in that particular rifle. And although no matter what it is that I choose for that rifle, it's, you know, a 3, maybe a 4 MOA gun, depending on a few aspects of what it is that I'm doing with it. With the distances that I shoot at, I basically never shoot beyond 100 yards, but with the distances that I shoot at, no matter what it is that I pick from a practical standpoint, all of those rounds would be fine in that thing. But I want to figure out, even though the differences are so gosh darn minor, I want to figure out which round would be best to suit my particular needs, even though all of those rounds would suit my particular needs. But which one is best, even though the best is so minorly best, it's like just a hair crawl better. than the other options. And again, you got to weigh your pros and cons. If I'm carrying around 100 rounds of 220 grain ammo and 100 rounds of 150 grain ammo, that 220 grain is going to be significantly heavier. Okay, I think I've rambled on long enough. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.